Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
This sponsorship brought to you by Success in Hiring. Are you struggling with recruiting, hiring, and retaining the right candidates for your business? I know the challenges you face every day running your business. Let me help you by sharing my Success in Hiring system with you. It is a 5-part series where we will cover these 5 areas. 1, recruiting. Number 2, interviewing. Number 3, hiring. Number 4, onboarding. And number 5, coaching. You will receive 1 video each day along with the downloadable resources to make it easy to implement the areas we covered that day. The best part of the series, it is totally free. Why? Because my goal is to help business owners succeed in business and life. To receive the series, go to chargepodcast.com and click on the Success in Hiring link. Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again this week for another great guest. Remember, my goal is to bring different guests with different viewpoints so you learn from their expertise. And today I'm bringing back an old buddy, and that's always fun to do, to bring back a friend onto the podcast. So Brad is with us. Before I give you all the details on Brad, I want Brad to share with us, what problem will you solve for our Chargers today?
Gary, I am a foundation guy. So what I do, I go by Coach D. I work with athletes all over the country in establishing a strong mindset, but we focus on the foundation. And so my goal is not only to focus on the foundation with those athletes, but to branch out and change the landscape of youth and high school sports, not only with their coaches, but with parents and sports organizations as well. So it's a big undertaking, but we're just wanting to make a difference and get back to the enjoyment of sports, what it's really meant to be.
Oh, no, I'm going to love this conversation because I love sports, but I think we've taken it too far, and we'll have that discussion as we go through. So the next one I want you to share with the audience members, there's 3 questions that really you will answer for the Chargers. What are those 3 questions you'll answer for our Chargers?
Well, I think most importantly, what I'm going to answer is, what exactly I do, but the relation between sports and life, Gary, life and sports. And why I love sports so much is the competitiveness. So I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to answer, you know what, Gary, I don't even, this is a conversation, but I forgot the other 2 questions I gave you.
Well, I know you wanted to talk about really how the impact of sports make in the sports scene, but that mindset that goes with it, you shared with us.
Yeah. Amen to that.
And then you talked really about that personal growth and development that with high schools, that really we've got to get back, as you said in your opening, to them fundamentals. So I'm really excited about this conversation, Brad.
I appreciate it. Sorry about that, man.
Not a problem. Well, I tell you, folks, Brad Dempsey launched Mindset Sports in June of 2021. He's a mindset and performance teacher and coach that works with athletes, coaches, parents, teams, referees, and sports organizations. He's also working on building personal growth and development programs for high school students, teachers, and administrators. So the reason I want you to hear this, Chargers, is because number 1, you may have a high schooler, you may have one coming up, or maybe in the case of they're older, like some of mine, they're in college already. There's still things we're going to glean from this information. So I know it's going to be a great conversation. Brad, why don't you start off with just sharing what kind of drove you to take this leap of faith to start Mindset Sports? Because I know you've been a coach, an athletic director, and all these other things, but to become an entrepreneur, that changes the game a little bit.
Gary, it really does. My time in education was I was so blessed. It was so rewarding, but it got to the point for me where I knew that I wanted to do more. It's not, I loved being at a school, but I could only impact the students at that school. And through a lot of prayer and conversation with my wife and close friends, I decided that, you know what, I was gifted, and one of my favorite coaches of all time, Coach Don Meyer, who's passed, he was the winningest basketball coach at one point. He told me, Brad, you got to give your gift away every day. And so I felt a calling to do more with the gifts that were given to me. And so now, you know, Gary, I pull into my garage every day. When I was a young person, when I was in college, I started a classic car business where I'd buy and sell classic cars. I'd fix them up back to original. And I have that sign where I look at it every day. I pull in my garage, and it reminds me that I can be an entrepreneur. Obviously, I think when we get older, we get more set in our ways, and we forget that, hey, we can be creative and we can go out there and do whatever we want to do. We just have to sometimes take that leap of faith. And what made me take that leap of faith, Gary, is I've really figured out how to have a relationship with the Lord. That's been a big game changer for me. I've spent my whole life around religion in the church, but the personal relationship for me, it was what allowed me to take that leap of faith.
Yeah, I'm sure that would change the game of really, okay, how is this going to happen? You know, you have a family, you have obligations, just like we all do. But, you know, the one thing that challenges us sometimes as we get older is we won't take that leap of faith. And I'm so glad to hear that really by your relationship with the Lord, it really allowed you that opportunity to really move forward. And it shows you have the entrepreneur in you, because if you sold classic cars, you know, that was already, that seed was planted at some point in your life early on that you're that type of individual. So that's a fun story.
Gary, I ran a car dealership out of my parents' house, their address. I jumped through a lot of hoops to make that happen. I'm like, man, if I can make this happen, there's some other things I should be able to do.
So what's the coolest, I have to ask this, what's the coolest classic car that you sold?
1973 Stingray Corvette convertible, 3-speed, 454, no, not 454, 363 maybe, but it's all original, 36,000 miles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I have a 1967 Mustang convertible, and I love that thing. And 67 was the year I was born. So it was one of those things. It was not a need, it was a want, and that I got, but it's so fun to have. And it's great to hear that story, Brad. So share with us really, what are you doing now with Mindset Sports, and how are you going to make that impact? And you're making it already, but how are you making that impact on the sports scene to start changing things?
And that's a great question, Gary. For me, slow and steady wins the race, right? So how I want to build the business, you know, I had the privilege of being around you, Gary. You were so invested in the school that I worked at as a parent. And I had a privilege of working there in a great school and learning a ton of lessons, sometimes the hard way. And for me personally, what I wanted to do is make sure that I build the business to where I'm not working 24/7 and burning myself out. So I'm very slow. I'm very cautious. I'm working with people all over the country, all over the world. I'm in a group with some people from the UK and Scotland right now, just making sure that I build the business to be efficient and effective to where we can reach as many athletes, as many sports organizations as possible without complicating things. So for me, honestly, the message right now, I'm focusing more on, I use a lot of my social media outlets, and this has been, it's been hard for me, Gary. It's been a struggle because I've always been a behind the scenes type of guy. So putting myself out there and how I put myself out there, and it has been a challenge, but I'm getting more comfortable with it because I'm just trying to be myself. I want people that if people want to work with me, they want to work with Mindset Sports, I want them to trust that I have their best interest at heart. And my ultimate goal is to maximize the potential of every single person that crosses my organization.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I really think it's a needed thing in our schools now. And I loved how you framed it in the very beginning. It's not just about the students or the athletes. It's also about the parents. And then you're even including the referees and the school system into your program, because the thing is we've kind of I don't know. I think we've kind of went off of a little bit of a cliff, and I think we all have this reset right now because of the great pandemic. People are really reevaluating what is most important. And we love our sports in America's society. And I'm sure even in other countries, they have their favorite sports that they have because it's our release, but it's not the be all to do all. It's really sports teaches lessons. And I know you've seen that as a coach and as an athletic director, Brad. Can you kind of speak to that as some of the lessons you think that we get out of sports?
Yeah, ultimately, what sports do is they bring out your competitive spirit. Okay. And your competitive spirit is driven by emotions. And if your emotions are based on, let's just say you're struggling with depression, or you're struggling with anxiety, or you're angry about something, you're going through something in your life. Ultimately, when you get into a competitive environment, those are the emotions that come out. And so we don't want to be driven by emotion in our sports, because we're supposed to compete for enjoyment. The good old adage of sportsmanship, right, Gary, that we used to talk about a lot. And so what I'm seeing from parents and everybody's on edge, obviously, from the pandemic, and plus you add other things in life on top, but everybody's on edge. So when we get to this competitive atmosphere, that edge comes out. It almost brings the worst out of people. And so for me, foundationally, that means there's holes and there's cracks in the habits. Athletes want to be great at a sport, but what they don't understand sometimes, Gary, is that everything that you do in your life, the habits that you have, impact your performance, not only in your sport, but in all aspects in your life. If you're a youth athlete or a high school athlete and you don't treat people well, you're not good to your parents, you're not kind, you're not choosing to be a good person, that's going to ultimately affect your performance. Maybe you're a great athlete, but longevity wise, something's going to happen where you're not going to be able to be consistently maintain those performances. So it's just really important to be grounded and have an understanding. I think the biggest thing for me, Gary, is self-awareness for our athletes, self-awareness for our parents, for our coaches, for the organizations you're running. But definitely, so that's why my biggest focus is just getting back to the foundation.
Yeah, I love that because, self-awareness is such a gift. People think, I do assessments, and in our assessments, it shows, and people are so surprised that they can answer 25 questions and they get back a report and it nails who they are. And I tell people all the time when I'm doing that training, it's not about who you are, it's about now you're aware of it. Now, if you do need to make adjustments, because everything in the report isn't rosy, there's some hard truth that comes out in that, but it really allows us to realize that. And as athletes, when we learn that and we're more self-aware, let's think about it. The professionals. If they're not self-aware of some of their weaknesses, they're not going to be a professional athlete very long at all.
You're right. And not only that, their strengths can become their weaknesses. And I'll tell the listeners this, Gary did a disc training for me at one point. Gary, I still have that profile. And at the time you look at it and you're like, wow, but then you kind of put it in the cabinet. A lot of people do. That's what most of us do. But the important thing about the work that you do and the work that I do and the people that are in the personal development world for the right reasons is they plant a seed. Yes. They plant a seed that it may not come out right away, but over time, you get back to that. And then, this is a full circle moment for me, Gary, being on this podcast for you, because you planted a seed for me a long time ago with your disc training. Your disc training was amazing. It was awesome. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I can hear just some of the words, when you talk about self-awareness, I love talking about that because it's such a personal growth thing. And it kind of really comes in that last question we want to really talk about. And we're going to talk about other things too. But what are you really hoping to accomplish with personal growth? And then with these development opportunities with the high schools, what is really your goal in mind to really make this mindset sports to help those individuals?
Yeah. And so there's a little separation there. So the mindset sports is definitely sports focused. The idea of me getting into the schools on the speaking end of things is obviously, Gary, I've spent a lot of years doing professional development in the schools. You've done professional development in the schools, and it's great, but a lot of times we sit there and spin our wheels. And for me, I'm focusing on something that focuses on the teachers and the students individually, which is personal growth and development in the schools. So what I want to do is go in and energize these schools, help them refocus on what's really important. We don't need teachers that are stressed to the max getting in front of our students every day, because they can't give them their best and they can't help those students maximize their potential. We need our students, our teachers walking into that classroom energized, happy, excited. And so a lot of the teachers, they need an opportunity to learn some great aspects about how they can control their mindset and how they can control, because a lot of times what happens is we get caught up in us, right? I've been through that when I was in education. Well, this is what I think, or you get caught up in making it about you. And then ultimately, it just becomes a negative, a downward spiral. And education is so important. So I want to get in there. I want to re-energize the schools. I want to re-energize the teachers. I want the kids to understand that, hey, you may not like something, but we all have to learn things that we don't want to do in life. We have to learn how to do it. And we have to learn that we can feel accomplished doing things that we don't like to do.
Yeah, I love that, Brad. And really, it is about energizing. One of the things you and I have similar characteristics that we love to talk about. I love talking about positive culture. And I always tell people is, you're a leader yourself. So how are you going to lead that team? So let's kind of maybe go to the point of, one of the challenges that sometimes educators get and that those teachers get is, it's another year. And one of the points I always make is it doesn't matter if it's your first year, if it's your 20th year. For those students, the majority of them's only had you this the first time. So how are you going to make that environment in that school? So if you're talking to educators, what would you share with them? Because I think we'll have some that's been listening to this podcast. I'm thinking of a few that I can send this to. What would you share with them to be able to really get them to be excited and energized in their classrooms for their students?
Well, and that's a fully loaded question, Gary. But yeah, one, people have to enjoy what they're doing.
Yes.
This is why I started Mindset Sports. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you find yourself going through the motions. You talk about teachers year after year after year going through the motions. Maybe there's an aspect of the job that they love, but the rest of it they don't. How can you challenge yourself to enjoy the aspect of the job that you don't like as much? How can you be, and for me, this is where I teach creativity. How can you creatively, and I love, people have to think. They have to be brought to thought. They have to be made to think. And that's what teachers are asking their students to do every day. So we have to practice what we're preaching to everyone else. But how can you creatively find a way to enjoy what's going on? And I understand, teachers feel piled on, and I get it right now. They're serving lunches. They're doing extra duty. There's no breaks. I mean, it's my wife's a teacher. She's still in education. It's really, really, really tough times, and they really care about the kids, and they're seeing families and kids go through things that we don't want to see anybody go through. So what can we do, even as a society outside of our schools, to help our teachers, support our teachers? Because, we have a pandemic health-wise right now, but if we have a teacher shortage across our country in the next 5 years, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, that's the thing. And we've got to really figure out, how do we support them? And then how can we help the teachers really with the tools that they can have in their toolbox, as I call it, and be willing to change? Because, education is changing just like business is changing. I mean, our whole world has changed with this pandemic, and it's the people that's willing to adjust and change their mindset is going to have that capability. Let's go to one last area, Matt, Brad, before we wrap up and stuff, really with those athletes. And so we can talk to them. As I told you, I've got an athlete still that's playing some college football. When you think about mindset and you think about mindset sports, and you talked about having the foundation, what is some of them key components that you think they really have to look at? Because, once they leave, the challenge we have is parents sometimes think, oh, we need to have them in everything. And we know that multiple sports is good. And I think that's good, but they don't always have to be the star when they're 8 years old. And you and I've seen this both. The kid that was the star at 8 and 10 years old sometimes burns out in high school. And if you was that parent and that athlete, what would you really share with them that to keep in mind as you're building that foundation?
Yeah, well, balance is key. Obviously, balance is so key. And that balance looks different for everybody. But I will say this, when it comes to competition, when it comes to games, when it comes to playing in competitive games, whether it's a recreational game, those get competitive too, or a highly competitive game. The habits that you practice in your training sessions, whatever sport you're participating in, are the habits that you are going to put into competition. So if you're not training properly and you're not learning and you're not enjoying learning, when you compete, those are the results you're going to get. And a lot of times, we'll have these athletes playing, they'll be training 4 times a week, but they'll play in 10 games. So if they have bad habits, every game they play in, they are reinforcing those bad habits. And when they, and the athletes that you're talking about, Gary, that are able to get away with it, with their athleticism, everyone catches up athletically. And what happens is when they get older, they run into coaches. It's hard to have the time to manage a team and go back and reteach all of the skills and the tactical knowledge that they've gained over the years. So what's really important is that we are intentional. All right. So there's a huge balance because we want it to be a learning experience. We want it to be fun, but we have to be very intentional. I see a lot of coaches coaching, but I see a lot of coaches not teaching. And as a coach, you're a teacher first. As a parent, you're a teacher first. And so you have to teach the skills and allow them to be creative. A lot of times coaches are robotic. They want the players are scared to mess up. What's the coach saying? What's the coach saying? No, we have to let them go. We have to let them be creative. We have to let them figure it out and problem solve for themselves.
Well, that is great information because I think that's the thing is it's just like in, education, you have to fail sometimes to be able to learn the successes, but what are we putting in each and every day to our lives? We talk a lot about in this podcast about habits, as you know, and, one of the things that comes up a lot is people having some sort of morning routine to start their day. And
Amen to that.
About, we started earlier about, when we don't spend some time in, your own reflection, then it's hard to be your best all the time in this go, go, go society. And I think if anything, I hope we've learned from this because we've got to still work on it, is you don't have to go, go, go. And I loved what you said earlier, Brad, because one of the challenges that entrepreneurs get is they get so driven for success that they kind of forget what they brought them to that success. And what you said in the very beginning, you're not working all the crazy hours just to make it work. Because a lot of times when we start a business, man, it takes a lot of time, but you have to find that balance. And it's the same thing in sports. Brad,
yes,
share with them. You've got some great resources on your website and you're developing more resources all the time. Share with them some of those things that you have. And of course, your website where people can go check it out.
Yeah. Website is mindsetsports.life and purposefully relating sports to life. And it's always a work in progress, Gary. The website is, it's there, but we're developing some products. I have a Foundation for Athletes product that's going to be coming out in February that involves coaching. It's going to be amazing. I don't think there's anything else out there like it. And I've put a lot of time and energy and resources into this. And so be on the lookout for that. I love to have people follow the Facebook page, obviously Mindset Sports Life. Instagram handle, Mindset Sports _, TikTok, Mindset Sports _ as well. And then the Mindset Sports podcast is something that I do with my good friend, Elijah Mayfield. We tell stories. And then I also do some value episodes. I'm getting ready to start something called Coach D's Dojo, where I interview former athletes and parents and coaches. So that's going to be fun as well.
Well, check out all those resources, but make sure you check out the podcast for sure, because Elijah, Brad and I both know him. He's a great friend of a lot of people. And it will impact your life and on that side of it. And, this is one area that Brad's kind of second fiddle there. Sorry, we know Elijah's the main man there.
And I like it that way.
Exactly. And good coaches are like that. You think about it, good coaches have others that they really bring up, and good leaders do the same thing. That's why I love talking about sports on this podcast, because sports and leadership go hand in hand. So Brad, I truly appreciate you joining us. Before we let you go though, you've got to answer the 2 recharge round questions. And I'd love to hear your comments here. My podcast is named Charge for Create Habits Around Real Goals Every Day. And we've talked about some of these even in the sports world, but what habit has led to success in your life?
Yeah, Gary, I've learned to start my day with God. I start my day with God every day, and I've learned to start my day accomplishing something. And so I like to accomplish something that I don't like to do. So it's laundry. I start my day with God and laundry.
Now that one I have not heard. The God one I've heard before, but the laundry side, okay, I'll give you that. But you get it done that way.
That's
now, the
right.
second one is we all would love to have do-overs, and we've all had failures in our life. What's that do-over you wish you could kind of change? What would it be?
Yeah, Gary, I don't believe in living in regret, but I would like to do over. My mom passed away when I was young. She saved my life. I was in a bad car accident when I was 13. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am now. And through the years of struggle, depression, anger, anxiety, I didn't treat her well. So if I could go back, I would have treated her differently. And that's why I tell every athlete I come across, tell your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, the people that are important to you in your life, tell them you love them every day.
What a great piece there, Brad. I appreciate you sharing that and being so open to do it. And the thing is, she does know now. That's the one thing I want you to let you know is I know with your time with God, he's passed that message on. He shared that message, and she's smiling today at you. So what a great,
Appreciate that.
Great thing. Well, Chargers, this has been a fun podcast. And I'll tell you, check out mindsetsports.life. Check out their podcast. A lot of great information. We'll have it all in show notes, so you can go to chargepodcast.com to be able to get all the details, get the quick links to be able to get the Brad's information, and make sure you check it out. Because the thing is, if you've got young children, you're setting that foundation Brad talked about now, either good or, sorry to say, bad. But you're setting some sort of foundation. And I'm going to give you one tip I heard, and I wished I would have done this when my children were really young, and I didn't pick it up till later, but I did pick it up when my son was in high school. When they get done with their game, don't tell them what they did wrong. Instead, say, Johnny, I just enjoyed watching you play. And if you want to discuss the game later, let that be several hours or maybe even the next day later. And I guarantee you it'll make an impact on your children, because when you walk off the field and you're telling them what they did wrong, right away, that's what you're putting into their mind, the mistakes. So that's one of my advice tips I give you. Chargers, I so appreciate you coming each and every week and joining us. Remember, like and share this podcast. Let others know about it. That's how we keep growing our field. Brad, thank you so much for joining the Charge podcast.
Thank you, Gary. I really appreciate it. Great time.
Chargers, make it a great day. We'll see you back here next week.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.